talking today about mortality in the general US population and a report from the SOA that is providing some analysis on US population excess deaths. So Cindy, I think it brings up a first level setting question. What is excess death analysis?
Well, that term, excess death, it comes from the CDC, and it's a type of analysis that the CDC has performed to understand the impact of an event like a flu season or COVID-19 on US population mortality. And it's very similar to an actual to expected or A to E analysis that an actuary might perform on their own mortality experience. So where an actuary may use a standard basic table or evaluation tables as their expected basis, the CDC is using recent population history to develop their expected rates.
Yeah, sounds good. And you mentioned, the CDC is doing this to really help understand a little bit more about COVID-19 mortality. COVID-19, just another one of these causes of deaths on a death certificate, right? And so I guess the question would be, why not just look today at what the listing of all the causes of deaths might be?
Well, yeah, there can be a lot of noise when you're doing a cause of death analysis, especially if you're using more recent data that hasn't really had enough time to settle in. So there can be reporting lags. This could take weeks. There are corrections to death certificates and can happen months after a death. In fact, it actually takes about 12 months for the CDC to release their final cause of death data. And then there's also quite a bit of subjectivity when it comes to coding up a cause of death on a death certificate. There's human beings behind every decision on
Sure.
what to put as a primary cause of death on a death certificate. So one way to cut through all the noise with causes of death is to and still get a sense of the impact of an event like COVID-19 is just to look at deaths overall in total and do an excess death analysis.
So, Cindy, how does this SOA analysis on population excess deaths kind of extend from what has already been highlighted by the CDC? And what's some nuances or differences? And I guess how can this be beneficial to digest by the actuarial profession?
So the CDC, when they do their excess death analysis, it's at the total population level across all sexes and age groups. And this paper that we've released demonstrates a way that you can do this type of analysis by age group and sex. So having these types of breakdowns by age and sex can be useful if you're trying to
Oh.
say compare your insured mortality to the general population mortality, and if the age mix of the two populations are different. So what you can do is you can actually use these breakdowns to adjust the age mix of the US population results to be the same as your insured population, and it'll make for a truer apples to apples comparison. And we actually did this for a recent group life COVID-19 mortality analysis, which was kind of the impetus for this whole report.
Yeah, and Cindy, I guess what are some of the key findings that we've been highlighting to members as they've been asking about this analysis?
So I'm showing a table here. In this table, it actually summarizes some of the key results you'll find in the report. So every row is a different age group, and we've got some different columns, some for females, some for males. And then the total column is all causes of death, and you'll see also a column excluding COVID. So those are all causes of death excluding COVID. And what this shows is the actual to expected or excess death ratios for the different age groups. And you'll notice I think it's interesting that some of the younger ages are the ones that have the highest ratios. So in the total columns, you'll see ages 35 to 54 have the highest ratios. And then if you're looking at the columns without COVID, so all causes of death excluding COVID, you see that even some of the younger ages have the higher A to E ratios. So I think could be kind of surprising, especially if you're used to hearing reports and on the news and such that say, oh yeah, the older ages are getting hit the hardest by COVID. Yes, they are, but older people tend to die more than younger people anyway. And really to get a better sense of what's actually happening, you want to compare to recent history. And that's what this table is showing.
Yeah, I'd note as well, we get a lot of questions too about how that progression changes once you get above age 65. And certainly you're seeing here that there's exponential sort of growth in this excess COVID mortality, but in some shape or form, it may even level out. It stays in that 16 to 17% range for females, even above age 65, even into the 80s and 90s. And the same thing
Hmm.
with males. It does hang out at a much higher rate, but it's not like all of a sudden we see it at 25 or 30% excess mortality for the most oldest ages. Cindy, I know we've done this initial report for 2020. I think you were noting that additional reporting can also be beneficial. So what are some of the next steps you see in adding on to this?
So this report was released in early February, and at that time we were using the most recent data available, and there were some questions about the December data that the CDC released. So we're going to actually update this report. We're letting that more recent data at the end of 2020 settle down, and we're going to be updating the report in the next month or so. And I'm hoping that this will be a useful exercise report for our members and others so that they can use this if they're making any kind of comparisons to of their data, their experience to population data. And I know we're going to be looking at using this for an upcoming SOA project regarding individual life COVID mortality.
Right. Well, Cindy, thanks for connecting in with us to discuss this look at 2020 excess deaths in the US general population by age and sex.
Thank you.
And as a reminder, this report can be found on the SOA website at soa.org by clicking on research, then click on US population. You'll see it among the wide range of other research projects we've been doing from the SOA on US population mortality research. Thanks for checking in with us on this update on research from the Society of Actuaries.